David runs Analytical Engines. Don't get scared. It's a smart grid, renewable energy and energy efficiency consultancy and software developer. They do all sorts of very clever things. Like they did a study for 100% renewables for Phillip Island and Locksport, and David's company did a demand management application protocol for IEA. Who knows what IEA is? Anyway, he's a boffin, but he's under strict instructions not to be too boffiny for us poor Ashburton people, right? So, over to you, David.
So, as Jenny said, I run a small company. As well as doing those larger projects, I've also done a lot of work with individual sites, including homes, offices, and I recently did a project where I analysed the interval data for 4,000 customers of one of the retail, 4,000 Victorian customers, for one of the retailers. So I've done a lot of this kind of analysis, looking at batteries and how they work at different sites and what you can get the most out of them and so on. Now, one thing I'll just say before I go into the presentation is that we're going to have probably several million batteries, home batteries in Australia over the next 10 years. Now, helping people to get the best out of those, so that's something I do know a bit about, and it's just not that easy. So the challenge is to get information out to people so they can use it and get the best out of what they spend on their batteries. So as I go through tonight, just if stuff that works well, great, keep that in mind and let me know afterwards. Stuff you think, well, okay, that's interesting, I didn't really get a clue what you're talking about. Let me know that too. And so, because what we're thinking about doing is trying to get some materials together to help people with this stuff through lighter footprints and possibly some other bodies. So the more feedback we get from people, and you're obviously a different kind of group because you're interested in the stuff, just about everyone's got solar, but not that many people have batteries. That was interesting. But yeah, it's getting the information out to people in a format they can use. Today I saw a guy reading his electricity bill from Texas in a William Faulkner kind of stream of consciousness, Southern Gothic kind of modernism style. Shows you what my life consists of. But anyway, so maybe that's what we need to do, a bit more of that kind of, do it in the sea shanty or something, I don't know. Excellent. So as I said, we're going to have a lot more batteries in the next few years. There's a very generous subsidy coming from the federal government starting in about a week or so, and that's going to really kick this along. But the challenge is how do people get the best out of their batteries? What battery to buy, what size, how do you configure it, how do you look after it, etc. The subsidy, it's just worth quickly just mentioning the subsidy. On a 15 kilowatt hour battery, it's going to be about $5,000. So that'll take that battery from being, say, around maybe 14, 15, somewhere like that, to around 10. And smaller batteries, say 10 kilowatt hour battery, you obviously get a lower subsidy. But, they might come in at around 6 or 7 installed, possibly better if you do some negotiation around that point. So it is really going to encourage this area. So why get a battery? I mean, that's the first question. It's like, why do you want one? Is it to get better use out of your solar? You're exporting a lot of solar at the moment and you're getting bugger all for it and feed-in tariff because they've gone to nothing. And in fact, they've been deregulated now. So the Essential Services Commission is no longer mandating a minimum tariff. There is a Victorian government regulation that the retailers can't buy at less than 0 cents. But some of it's already down to 3 cents a kilowatt hour with some retailers. If you're getting a lot for your feed-in tariff, you're probably paying a lot for the other parts of the tariff. So keep that in mind. You think, 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that sounds great. But then if you're paying, 40 cents a kilowatt hour for your peak tariff, then you're not doing so well. So keep that in mind. So that's one reason. So then obviously to put that energy into the battery and then save money by replacing otherwise expensive grid supply with it. Or possibly using a solar saver tariff. Now I'm going to talk, has anyone heard of that? Like, I'm kind of interested in solar saver tariffs. Well, completely, isn't that interesting? Energy geeks go, one person. Energy geeks go on and on about them. The idea of a solar saver tariff is to have cheap power across midday, largely fueled by the rooftop solar that's exporting at that time, which is a great way to share with the community that rooftop solar. But there's I'm on one, and I get free power between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And I'll show some charts where someone, I know a colleague who I've done some work with is getting very good value out of here. So I know there's some other people in here who are using them. Outage resilience. Now, the grid around here is very good. I mean, we have excellent energy supply. I'm in the city power zone. Probably a lot of people in this room are in city power. You don't get many outages. But, we're heading into the Anthropocene. Weather's going to get crappier. That's already... I've got a farm in the country, and we lose power all the time down there. It really is quite appalling. I get regular updates from Ausnet. Oh, your power's back on. Oh, it's gone off again. Sorry about that. And that's because the tree's fallen over, or there's flooding, or there's bushfires, or, it's just this constant litany. Now, we're not going to have that kind of stuff here so much, but we're also trying an experiment that hasn't been done before, and that's moving a major grid to run on variable renewable energy. And there's going to be some whoopsies, so maybe it's worth keeping that in mind, that resilience might be useful. If you do think that's important, your battery, an inverter, needs to support islanding. It needs to be able to support outages. Just buying a battery doesn't give you outage support. That's a common mistake that people make. Maybe you want to think about trading. I mean, I'm not going to talk about this much tonight. I did have a slide in, but I took it out. A lot of people are interested in doing stuff through Amber. Who's heard of Amber? Yeah, quite a lot of people. Is anyone on Amber? Not many. Only a couple. Yeah, so it's probably got a job. I'm not going to be talking about it much. But, I mean, some people are doing quite well out of it, others aren't. Social media is full of it. I've seen some bills from people that are doing well out of it, but other stories not so great. But it's probably not as important right now for this group. So here's a house I'm doing some work with. Now, you can see there, they installed solar and a battery in August 23, and they installed it in late 23, which is why the August bar is still a bit high. But you can see this massive difference it's made to their consumption, absolutely massive. But you can also see they're still using quite a bit of power in the middle of the year, and that's because they've gone to split cycle air conditioning, and they're heating the house using that split cycle. So you can see at the bottom, on the left-hand side, the left-hand side bar is generation, and on all of those groups with those three, the middle one is export, and the one next to that is consumption. So you can see that consumption drops off. Generation drops off as you go towards the middle of the year. Export drops as you'd expect. Export's what's left after what you've consumed on site, but your grid consumption is going up. Now, this site might be a good opportunity for solar saver tariff, and I have discussed that with a client, and we're looking at maybe we should implement that. That means she could top her battery off during winter at a very cheap price, and then supply into the peak tariff and drop her consumption dramatically. This house is fully electrified, and it's been weatherproofed as well. So it's an interesting case study. I'm seeing a lot of that reasonably high consumption during winter because people are heating their house now with split cycle. Sizing the battery, well, the first thing, of course, is your budget. I mean, it's probably not as relevant for this group, but certainly for a lot of people it will be. Now, some installation costs will be about the same no matter how big the battery. So when you amortise those costs across the battery, obviously a smaller battery, it's going to be more per kilowatt hour of those relatively fixed installation costs. And the same thing will apply if you go modular. I mean, I love the idea of a modular battery. You put in, say, 6 kilowatt hours, then maybe add 2 kilowatt hours, then another 2, whatever. Same issue. Like every time that electrician comes around to install the battery, there's going to be a bunch of costs. You may be better off thinking, all right, well, let's just go for a bit bigger to start off with and not have to worry about topping it up later on with a bit more supply. Now, you need to put electricity in to get electricity out. Now, how much excess solar generation do you have? If you haven't got any, or if you've only got a little bit, there's not much point putting a battery in unless you're going to add more solar or you're going to go to a solar saver tariff. Because I wouldn't recommend buying a battery to charge off the off-peak period in a standard time of use tariff and then discharge into the peak period. And I'll show why later on. If you want to trade, obviously, then you need a larger battery. You're probably going to reserve some capacity for outage support if you do want to have that. Powerwalls, for instance, have a default of 20% for that. I do really detailed analysis on this, and I'm going to show some in a minute, where I start with the current usage at the site, and I then add on what the projected new electrical equipment is. That'll typically be like an EV charger or new air conditioning or maybe a hot water heat pump or whatever. And then I do detailed analysis at the 30-minute level for right across the year to see how that's going to go. If your demand is small, below about say 2 to 4 megawatt hours, you're not going to get much financial benefit from a battery. But you get that resilience benefit if you want to have power supply that's reliable. We've got one member of the audience I know who uses about 350 kilowatt hours a year, which is just extraordinary, an excellent effort. And his house wouldn't save a whole lot of money if they put a battery in, but the resilience might be attractive. I've found that most sites, or many sites, between about 8 kilowatt hours to 15 kilowatt hours seems to be pretty reasonable sort of size. But some sites use a lot of power, and a bigger battery is good at that site, particularly with these cheaper prices. So here we go, the nice detailed. You can tell the guy who worked in finance for a while. So what I've done here is I've actually started with their current consumption. I've added for the air conditioning, they want to put in 3, and it looks like they're going to put another one in. Not the split system. They want an EV. At this point, they don't want an induction to cooktop because they spent a lot of money on a stove not that many years ago, and they don't want to throw that out. And they don't want to move off their gas at the moment because they've got a relatively good condition, newish gas heater, and they don't use any hot water anyway. So what I've done there is I've worked out an estimate for their power use with those new systems. And then what I've done is some sensitivity analysis where I said, all right, well, let's have a look at that with 8 kilowatts of solar, no battery, a 10 kilowatt hour battery, and a 14 kilowatt hour battery. And you'll see that there's quite a nice saving on the electricity costs with the solar, excellent investment. I've gone 8 kilowatts rather than trying 4 or 6 because I know what they're going to be doing. They're probably going to be using the extra capacity. There is quite a bit of export with no battery and just the 8 kilowatts. But they told me they want a battery, so yeah. Anyway, so quite a nice saving with the solar. Still about $700 or so a year benefit with the battery. That's reduced because you're putting power into the battery. You're not exporting it anymore. Now this was done at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, so that impact will change as the price goes down. Anyway, it's something like this is useful, but I don't think there's a whole lot of people doing it to this level. The other thing that stands out is adding another 4 kilowatt hours at this site doesn't make a lot of difference. I mean, it's really, you're only getting a little bit more saving. That's because you've used the battery to supply into all the demand that you can supply into. You've got very little left that a battery can supply to. So what features can help you then to get the best from a battery? Static scheduling, just insist on it. That's the ability to set when the battery can charge or discharge and when it can't charge and discharge. And I'll show some charts showing why that's important. Make sure you can charge from grid as well as from rooftop solar. Now that might sound a bit odd, but I have seen sites where that was an issue for various reasons. Now optimization is an interesting one. As the Energy Transformation Group knows, I could talk about that extensively for some period of time, but the Powerwall, for instance, has an onboard algorithm that optimizes the battery charge and discharge according to its projection of your load and your solar generation and the tariff you're on, if it's been configured with the tariff, which you need to do. So it'll charge from the cheapest source and discharge into the best value. Now, a home energy management system, which is kind of the step up from just having that optimization on a battery, that can actually integrate the EV charger, your hot water, the battery, the solar, the tariff to get the best result. And I think we're going to start to see a lot more home energy management systems, that they're already becoming a thing. And some people might have heard of Catch Power, which is sort of like an artisanal version of an early version, to some extent, of a home energy management system. Although I believe they are improving some of the capability. Now, it's really important to have on-site control access for so a home energy management system can actually control the battery. That might sound like, well, of course you'd have that. Well, not necessarily, because some battery manufacturers basically tell you to piss off. They don't want it. They don't want you to have that local control. Open standards, in my opinion, are very important. As Jenny mentioned, I've written a report for the International Energy Agency on that topic. That's something dear to my heart. It means it's a lot easier to integrate with other equipment and to replace the equipment at the end of life. You haven't got all the stuff that's you just got to buy the kit that goes, your kit from the same vendor. And also, what if the vendor goes broke or goes out of business? You've got, all of a sudden, you've got what the technical term is a brick. Easy access to battery data. I can't emphasize this too much. It makes fault finding and configuration and optimization, just by setting static scheduling and so on, so much easier if you've got good data from the battery. What retail tariff? I'd suggest that you should be on a time of use tariff with a battery. There's not much point being on a single rate. Single rates are easier, but a lot of the benefit from a battery is discharging into a more expensive time. So any residual use is at a low off-peak rate. So look, by all means, if you just don't want to have anything to do with time of use tariff, which some people don't, go single rate. But single rate, you won't be getting the same kind of financial benefit from it. And as I've mentioned a couple of times, solar saver tariffs, well worth having a look at. And why do I say that? So we've got here a colleague that I've done a bit of work with him at his place. What you can see there, that grey obelisk in the early morning, that's an EV charging on a very cheap rate. It's sort of 7 cents a kilowatt, or something like that, or 9. I can't remember what it was, but it's very cheap. And then you can see the battery's actually been blocked out at that time, so the battery can't discharge. Otherwise, what might be happening is you'll be discharging from the battery into the EV, which you don't want to happen, right? You've got this cheap power. That's what you want to be using to charge your EV. So you can see then later on that he's removed that blocking and the battery starts discharging into a bit of demand on the site. The green line is the battery. Then the charge state of the battery starts going up, and you can see that that's due to the solar. And also, when it hits that time of use period between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m, there's a bit more going in from the grid as well. You can see there in the grey. Then the battery's discharging again into the evening, into the more expensive peak period. Now, this is what you don't want. This is what you absolutely do not want. And there's reasons why this happened at the house, and I won't go into them, but, it's one of those things. So the EV is charging there at the most expensive part of the day, and the battery hasn't been blocked out. So it's actually charging partly from the grid at expensive power and partly from the battery. That is what you don't want. You absolutely don't want. So that's a good example of that. But as I said, there was reasons why that happened that day. Now this is the chart of righteousness and virtue. So you can see that between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m, the EV is charging. That's in the very cheap period, the free period, and also the battery's charging. You can see that the state of charge line on the battery going up over that period to when it's filled its boots. Then you can see it again. It's discharging into that more expensive peak period later in the day. It's really handy to spend some time looking at the app. I know there's people in this audience that spend a lot of time looking at their battery app, and they are quite fascinating. But you don't have to totally geek out on that. As I'm going to mention, looking at them occasionally is definitely useful. So I've kind of already said, there's this idea of the temporal price spread, and that's what you're paying for the power you put into your battery and what you're getting paid for the power you're taking out of it. And obviously, if you can charge off excess generation that would otherwise be going out to the grid for not much or even zero perhaps at some retail tariffs, then that means that you're getting very cheap power into your battery. You should be if you're on a time of use tariff, they should be costing you about 15 cents a kilowatt hour for off peak and about 25 cents a kilowatt hour for peak. If you're paying more than that, you're paying too much. So assuming that you've got your tariff right, then you've got 10 cents a kilowatt hour spread between peak. It's just not you wouldn't buy a battery just to charge and discharge off a standard time of use tariff. Solar saver tariffs, as I've mentioned, the cheap across midday. The Co-Power one, full disclosure here, I've done a bit of work with Co-Power, but they're a bit more expensive across midday, but they've got 5 hours. So that means you could charge the battery at a relatively gentle, say 10 kilowatt hour battery, relatively gentle 2 kilowatts. Whereas if you're using, say, the Glowbird, which last time I checked was free between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m, if you need to put a lot of power in the battery, you've got to charge it at a higher rate. And that might be an issue with the battery, that might be configured so you can't do that, or you've actually got to change some stuff and so on. And just as a general rule, the more gentle you are with the battery in terms of charge and discharge, the longer it will last, the longer, I mean, you should get a good length of time out of them. They're warranted usually for a number of cycles and so on. I'm sure Trent might be talking to some of that a bit, maybe, but yeah. So this is a very rough calculation, and I want to emphasize very rough. So I've made some assumptions here on a 10 kilowatt hour battery, and I haven't actually got any reserve there for outage, and some assumptions about what it's costing to go, et cetera. But and that you're discharging into a mostly into a peak time of use period, maybe a little bit of off peak. Realistic, you should, it's in that order, around 700 or 800 a year, you might expect. But that's a very rough calculation. Every site will be different. Some sites you might do better than that with that bigger battery. Other sites you'll do worse than that. So that's just a very rough indicative figure. It's certainly not one you're going to go out and buy a battery on. Anyway, monitoring battery health and performance after installation. So make sure the battery is capable, installed, configured and commissioned for what you want to do with it. I'd actually make a list. These are the things we want out of this battery. Discuss that with your installer, the person you buy it off, and just say, and actually get written confirmation. If you want outage support, get written confirmation that it's going to give you outage support. And if you want it to be a static schedule, which it should be, but just get it in. Just have an email, a formal communication with the installer that this is what it will do for you. If it's got onboard optimisation, get the installer to configure it with your tariff plan details. I see a lot of sites where that hasn't happened. So the battery thinks it's on a single rate rather than a time of use. And so the battery goes, oh, well, it doesn't matter when I charge and discharge, does it? And, as I've suggested keeping an eye on battery performance, using things like that app I showed you before. That was off of Fronius, by the way, the inverter. So that, which I find that they've got really good data reporting and that they're a good inverter as well. And again, your battery should give you full access to this detailed interval data, which I think I've mentioned a few times now. And as I said, I don't think you can emphasise it too much. Community benefits from home batteries. I can remember when everyone said that rooftop solar was, middle class welfare and stuff like that, which I thought was nonsense at the time, and it was nonsense, frankly. There's actually been a lot of benefits to the community from rooftop solar, which I'd be happy to go into in detail at some point. I think we're going to see similar effects with home batteries. There's things like reduces the amount of anything you do behind the meter reduces the need for transmission, which is expensive, socially divisive, and you've now got AMO even admitting they're not going to be able to cover the landscape with pylons. In the recent draft network opportunities report they released, 200 pages. They actually go into some detail that, maybe we're not going to be able to build all this transmission. And they're saying, well, actually, we've got about 60 gigawatts of capacity that's relatively accessible at cheap prices on the distribution networks. So anything you can do behind the meter will tend to have that benefit. Also, it reduces distribution network augmentation need and scheduling. You've, I've just given a rough indication there of what you might get from a million batteries discharging at, say, 2 kilowatts into the NEM in peak period. It will reduce NEM spot price, which is a benefit for everyone. Reduces subsidies for front of meter stuff. And people ask about renters and apartments. Well, there's portable batteries for sale now in Australia, and in Europe, in some countries, they're legal to install at apartments and rented properties. And it's just, I know one of the guys on the standards committees that we're responsible for this, and he said, yep, we get the political pressure, we can do it. There you go. Participate in a VPP. Look, basically you're handing over control of your equipment to someone else so they can make money out of it. Now, that may or may not give you a benefit. The purported reason that the sector loves it is this idea that it's going to provide all sorts of grid benefits. There's no public detailed data from a commercial VPP demonstrating that benefit to the grid. So I think at the moment that claim is moot and it really should be backed up by evidence. And there's no authoritative evidence to show that in fact doing it using the static scheduling I've mentioned and some other various BTM means wouldn't some on-site smarts and so on wouldn't give you a comparable benefit. All right, well that's it. Thank you all for listening. I hope that was useful. I'll be here for a matinee on Sunday. So I'll be here after the talks if anyone wants to catch up with me, and I think we're having questions. And
I come up too early.
He's too early. He's the founding and managing director of All Electric Homes, there's a clue, and a pioneering company dedicated to transforming residential and commercial energy use in Victoria. Thanks, Trent, for coming.
G'day everyone, thanks for coming down tonight, really appreciate it. There's a lot of people in the room which is fantastic to see, so I think there's obviously some members here and a lot of new faces, so thanks for coming down. I'll just give you a bit of a background of who I am, where I've come from. I'm an electrician by trade, 20 years in the industry. Just over 11 years ago I founded my first company, which was called Sparky. Sparky, we did everything electrical. We took on any electrical work we could. My wife over there was by my side the whole time. She started the company with me. 6 years down the track, we founded a plumbing arm. So we founded a plumbing company, and that plumbing company, the aim of that was to install hot water heat pumps across the state as far and wide as we could go. We got to a point where we were doing nearly 100 hot water heat pumps a week with that company. With that, we expand our services into a reverse cycle air conditioning, all this sort of stuff that we operate under the VEU program for to try to leverage rebates for our clients. So with our electrical company that we built and our plumbing company that we built, we had all the trades and services that we needed to actually electrify homes. And so it made sense for us to, we found all electric homes about 3 years ago. We kept it hiding for about 12 months because we just really wanted to see what the demand was for it, how well it performed, and how well an integrated trade service could actually deliver an end-to-end service. So it had tremendous results, really good traction. The demand was there. So about 18 months ago, we actually opened it to public. And we use our combined services to have that beautiful outcome. So we've got a team of 35 full-time employees. Our main focus is home electrification in residential and commercial buildings. And I tell you what, it's so confusing even for us, right, about what's going on here and all the policy changes, the regulation changes. There's so much going on. So when you're not in the game and you're just a consumer, I totally get where the confusion lies. And so I suppose it's my mission to try to debunk and demyth all the problems that we think are there, and just give you some hard truths around what's actually possible, because it's a lot easier than you think. And I think we just need to expose that and show stats and figures. Some of the stuff that David was showing earlier, it just needs to be seen, and then we can see it and understand the metrics. And it comes down to your motivation and what you want to do. Understanding the why, it's like the basic life principles. Why leads to what and how, but we've got to start with the why. So I'll go through my presentation, guys, and I'll hopefully just try to keep it simple and make sense to you. That's my job. So some of the stuff that we see out there in the field. So guys, I'm just going to sort of talk to you about some of the real stuff that you see day to day. So one of the things that can cause unknown costs that you might be unaware of is the existing switchboards that you have in your property. So if you've got an old porcelain fused switchboard, you can't add solar to that. And if people are, you need to have another chat with them. What we see a lot of installers just bolt onto these systems. The issue we've got here with these old porcelain fuse boards, the main switch actually doesn't protect the mains cables that enter your property. It has no thermal protection there. So if you exceed the maximum demand, so basically if you start loading your house up and adding more electrical appliances on, because we're going through this transition, right? We're coming off the gas, we're putting high demand on the electricity grid. It plays a big factor on our mains cables, and when they're not properly protected, that's when they can catch fire. So it's really important that you address that. And if you've got an old porcelain board and you're not getting solar or battery anyways, you should be doing that just for just general protection. No safety switches at the top there. So if you were to come in contact with a live part, you may die. This stuff here protects you. It cuts out before it can do any damage to the body. So it's pretty important stuff. 3 years ago, they mandated that in any rental property. No rental property now is allowed to have a board like that. And if you've got a rental property and you've still got a board like that, you better get it looked at straight away. So that can be a hidden cost when you're adding solar or battery and whatnot. And a lot of solar systems will be out there still with these in place. So if you've got an old solar system that you got done in 2008 or 2012, you might have one of those. And when it's time for you to renew, because I'm sure there was a lot of hands up in this room that has rooftop solar, and if you were on that high feed-in tariff rate of 65 cents, that ran out last year. So if you're that cohort, you really should be looking at upgrading your solar system. We can't add to those systems anymore. They're too old. The standards have changed like 10 times. So we can't even, so it's easier and cheaper to rip them off and start again. Some other questions we have: if I have two-phase power, how do I back it up with a battery? We back up one phase at a time there, or we can do some rearrangement at your switchboard to, we can shift phases around. So basically what that means is, if you've got your whole house, let's just say it's cut in half, one phase supplies power to one half of the house, the other phase supplies power to the other half of the house, we can move things around the switchboard to make sure they fall onto the battery, so you have what we call essential power and non-essential power. So essential power is stuff like what's important to you. What do you want to keep on when the power goes out? Fridges. Some people, we put one connected to a guy's cellar the other day because he had $10,000 worth of wine down there. You know, it just depends what's important to you, and anything's possible, and we can do anything. You just need to have these conversations and be aware what you've got access to. So it's really important to have all this conversation with your installer. You know, things like one that gets missed a lot is the roof space and access. A lot of companies will go out, take a few, well, that's if they even come out, right? They miss stuff like that. So, and that can have a huge impact to the installers trying to get the job done. How do they get the panels on the roof? Or if it's batteries that we're putting in, is there enough space? Is it too close to a fence? You know, all that sort of stuff's really, really important to look at. And we don't expect you guys to know all the, you can't ask questions that you don't know what to ask, right? So you don't know what you don't know. So again, it is quite hard to understand where do we start. So yeah, what we've got here is, what we look for when we are trying to place a battery is space. It is important that we have enough space. There's regulations around clearances to the left, to the right, to above, to in front. And what's probably the most common one is that we just need to make sure that we install them on an area where there's no habitable, if there's a habitable room behind that, so if it's a place where you sleep, we need to ensure that there's a fireproof membrane in between, something like a cement sheet or a brick side there. So this being an internal wall, the room behind that, I would hope it's not habitable because it's just been secured to a plasterboard. This is installed in a garage. It is one of the most common places and preferred places. It depends on, again, the person and what's important to them. They'll last the longest inside, the sun won't get to them, and they're just protected from the elements. So the garage is generally a good place. And if it is going in where there's trafficable area, where you can get mechanical damage, the bollard's required, just so you don't hit it. That bollard, I don't agree with that because I think you could kick that over with your feet and still hit that thing. So these standards are always changing and moving. So they generally wait till something bad happens and then they'll move it again on us. So yeah, they're just some of the things about battery placement. North facing walls outside, if that's your only spot that they can go, that's fine. But we need to build an enclosure around them to protect them from the sun. So anything's possible, it's just that we've got to make sure we tick all those boxes for compliance and safety. Yeah, so some of the stuff that was mentioned earlier, just around VPP, you guys, a lot of speculation and talks going around vehicle to home. How do we charge we use the car battery to power the home? You know, I bought an EV 6 years ago and I was told it was 2 years away, and I keep getting told that. Is it coming? It is coming. There's just so much regulatory things that we've got to do to overcome these hurdles. There's plenty of pilots going on around at the moment, and we're getting closer. And from us, from installers, we don't really have a confident supplier of products that we're going to come into the country. So it's really hard to try to future-proof or give you advice around future-proofing for this, because there's not a lot of cars that can do it, and there's not a lot of equipment that we've got available here in Australia, just because we haven't even written the standard for it yet. So manufacturers aren't going to manufacture a product if we don't know what the standards are. So it will come. Giving you a quick understanding of what VPP is, it does get said a lot, and I know a lot of people just nod at you when you say it, and we both think that we know what we're talking about when we don't. But essentially what it is you're giving access, a power company or whoever's on the arrangement, you're giving them access to your battery, and they can turn it on, turn it off whenever they feel like. They'll pull it from you. And the problem with that is, you know, if they discharge a battery and then you've got to have a power outage, you've got no battery power left. So there's just some pros and cons around that, and it's just important to read up on it. So if someone does approach you with it, have a good read. It's not for everyone. Sometimes it's more hard work, but if you're focused on that and you love that, then do it. But make sure you read up about it and read the fine print, because yeah, you can get caught out and caught off guard. Just a little bit of vehicle to home. So the idea around that is your electric vehicle, when you plug that in at night, it draws power from your car, it runs your home. It's exactly what a battery is doing, but it's on wheels essentially. You can drive it to work, charge it at work for free, come home and power your night. Sorry, come home and power your house for free. So it's going to be pretty cool when it comes in. I've held off actually getting a battery personally because I've just been waiting to plug my car into the house, but I'm still waiting 6 years later. Because the battery in your cars, as opposed to what we used to install in homes, I say used to because everything's changed now. With this new battery rebate, the way we used to talk about batteries is so different to how we're going to talk about them in the future. And this is what I was referring to earlier. It's hard for us as installers to keep up with all the changes because what happens with policy and all that changes the way we talk, changes the way we design, and changes the way we look at the future. Because if we go back in 2012 when we were getting 70 cents feed-in tariff, yeah, a small system suited that because we still had a heavy reliance on gas. There wasn't so much power being drawn from the home, so we didn't need a big solar system. So the advice back in the day was match it to your demand. And the demand from electricity was quite low. So you didn't need a big solar system. And because there wasn't much of it happening, they were trying to incentivize you by paying you a huge feed-in tariff. So how we spoke about solar and stuff back then is so different to now, because now they're forcing, they're forcing us to go all electric, get off the gas, and we're reducing emissions and we're doing all that good stuff, but it's now increasing our energy demand. That means those small solar systems are useless. To give you an idea, a 2 kilowatt solar system won't even, if you turned your toaster on, your toaster pulls 2.3 kilowatts. Doesn't even have enough energy to run your toaster while that toaster's cooking. All right, to give you, that's the best metric I can think of. So, you just think of all the other things we're putting in the homes, all these reverse cycle air cons, these hot water heat pumps. Yes, they're highly efficient energy products, but they're still adding to your electricity. Therefore, we need bigger solar. And therefore, if you don't match the solar to your new energy profile, what's the point of a battery? Because you're not going to have enough to charge that battery. So all these things we've got to consider around that. So I'll just go into that a little bit deeper about just sizing your home. What's really important when you're looking at a battery, well, the first question I ask is, why? Why do you want a battery? And a lot of people don't actually know the answer to that. They think, well, everyone's doing it. There's rebates there. There's some value in it. But the first question is why, and that leads into the how and the what. We must understand your energy profile, what you're consuming in gas and electricity, before we can even tell you what size battery system you need. If you have an installer not looking at your electricity account, they're not going to be appropriately sizing it to your demand and energy requirements. So, that's the most important thing first. Otherwise, how do you size a battery? And it's also important to also understand what are the other upgrades you're going to do to your house in the next few years. When you spend all this money on the battery, they're not cheap, and the solar system that's going to support it all. Do you plan on removing more gas from your property? Do you plan on going all electric? Because if you are, we're going to have a very different conversation around what size battery you need, because we've got to look at what you're doing now, but what's your load going to be like in the future when we pull gas away and add more electricity demand. So we really need to look into the future there. And a lot of people go, well, I can't afford to do all that. And if you look into it, and this is exactly what we do, were you aware that here in Victoria, now with this new battery subsidy coming in, to electrify a home, Victorian households have up anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 in state and federal funding in rebates that you don't have to pay back. It's not a loan or anything. We can get that from a house if we look at everything properly. And that's looking at, if you've got gas heating, right? You got up to $5,000 in government subsidies to encourage you to go to reverse cycle splits or a ducted system. You've got the subsidies around your hot water to go to heat pumps. So all this sort of stuff. Now, when you start stacking all this stuff up, you soon begin to realise that how affordable it all is when you put that solar system on the roof. And when you understand what that looks like, that's when we can size your battery. That's the ultimate goal here. Because if someone comes to me and they go, Trent, I want a battery. I'm like, great, are you still connected to gas? They go, yep. What's the battery for? And that's an important question, because there's, usually I see three motivators into what gets people to move to a battery. One's the environmental. Three motivators. One's environmental. The other one wants grid stability. So they want to be able to, they just love the fact that if there's a power outage, they're going to be the only one on the street that can still hum along. All right, so it is important. And the other one's to reduce their power usage, right? So they're relying on the grid. They're not buying coal-fired power, and they're using all their renewables, and they're using the energy at night to draw from the battery rather than buying from the grid. So it's important to understand that motivator, because if they're buying a battery and they've still got gas, it's just like, well, are you buying it because you want grid stability? Are you buying it because you really love the environment and you've got the money to afford that? Because what you're doing there, you're not going to get the best benefit from. Because especially with heating and hot water, they're the two biggest gas consumers in your home. Heating's number one. 60% of your gas bills are from that. 30% is from your hottie. The rest is like your gas cooker and whatnot. Now, if you've got a nice, big, decent battery, you've got a big solar system, you've charged that bad boy up, it's sitting there full, and you've got gas heater running all night, what benefit are you going to get from a monetary value from that? You're going to be paying all this money for the gas to be cooking, and your batteries, you're going to wake up in the morning with 80% battery still. So you've got to think about that. So I think with this coming into effect July 1, it's going to change. It's going to change the way we're thinking around all this, because it is a much more available 30% reduction in cost of battery. Yep, 100%. What used to cost you 10 grand is going to cost you around 6 for a 10 kilowatt battery. That's what we've seen in the last few years. 9.6 kilowatt batteries have been sort of the standard size battery. But that's going to change. Now it's going to be a 20 kilowatt battery because they're more affordable. And once we start thinking about all the other upsides we get from degassing, people are going to be spending more and putting bigger batteries in. So that's what I think we're going to see in the next year. This battery subsidies here for 5 years, $2.3 billion. We've done some rough calculations on that. We expect anywhere between 700 to 800,000 batteries installed across Australia over the next 5 years. That's 7,000 batteries a week that they need to try to squeeze in order to meet this target. So there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of confusion still. Today, this battery rebate starts in like 12 days. I still don't know how to process the rebate. We don't know. So it's going to be confusing if you're going out to the market and talking to installers. Work with them, because they're not getting the advice they need to tell you guys. So it's a confusing market, but just be cautious out there and try to. Groups like this, great. It's what we need to see, because you can get together, get some real truth out of what's going on, and then make your decisions from there. Yeah, just some of the things we spoke about earlier, guys. So is my switchboard compatible? We spoke about that. Future plans, I just spoke about that. Warranties, yeah, very important to go to which battery do I pick? That's a very personal question, and it's a hard one to give abroad, because batteries are like a little bit like politics. It depends on where they're made, what they do, what the components are. It's a tough one. So I like to talk about the battery style and the brand and all that on a more personal detail, because it can be quite political. I drive a certain electric vehicle that I sometimes hide around the corner when I go to people's homes to do site visits, because they have political views on that, and each to their own, right? I won't name the car. This is my last slide, I think. So this is what we do. We look at every item in the home, and we look at that holistically and understand your journey, because it's not simply, I just want a battery because, Norman next door's got one. It's why. Why do you want it? So we can help you with your next steps. I think that's it. If you want to know more about it, you can scan that. That will take us straight to our page. But thanks for having me, guys.
Now we're going to invite 3 members of Lighted Footprints who are going to come and tell us what they've done right, what they've done wrong, and if they're doing it again, what they would do differently.
This is a view of our house with the PVs on the roof. It's north facing at the top, so we've got north facing and east and west down there, and the battery is on the right at the back on a south-facing wall. So I'll just, that's it. This is the PVs being fitted on our roof, and this is the stuff of it. This is in that living room, you can see at the top our big heater cooler system, and our now empty, sadly, gas fire that I miss like crazy. There seems to be no replacement. Somebody please find an electric fire that works. It'd be a great idea. And this is my new electric. We've got a Volvo that we've had for a few years, and I just got this new little Nissan Leaf. That's our battery, which sits on slate at the bottom and a firewall behind on the south side. So we're trying to do the right things by where it's set. That's the list of stuff that we've put on, starting 2008. It means that the solar panels, which were actually 16 in 2012, 2008 was when we had a solar hot water system. That was our birth, solar hot water. We don't have it now, it sort of died, but we've still got if you look at the bottom, instantaneous gas hot water. That one is the leftover bit from the hot water solar on the roof. Still going strong. Powerwall, the heat pumps around the house, an induction cooktop, plus one electric car, and now 2 electric cars, can you believe? We get power from the grid still, but by comparison, 2,600 kilowatt hours by nearly 10 from the solar. We consume nearly 8, which leaves, of which most of it is solar. We export to the grid 4,600, of which 2,000 is solar, and our core carbon dioxide reduction is about 10 tonnes, which is a major issue for us. This is the driver for us, was to say, what can we actually do to lighten our footprint? And this is fundamentally why we're doing it. And that's the savings we've made. You can look at them in detail and see how we've worked them out. But it is roughly, it's over $5,000 on that lot. We have, from the battery, reckoned that the additional that we make out of savings is about $1,200 per year. And we look at that, 44 little outages were recorded, which we didn't know about. The business of storing the off-grid power, off-peak time into your battery and using it when you're in peak times is also something we're exploring a little bit further. And lastly, just a bit on, if you summarise over all these years the costs, they do add up, and in fact they're much, much cheaper now. But we still pay electricity. Mind you, quite a lot of that's the electric vehicles that we run overnight when we need to. So it's not a high bill, and our gas bill is 3 people's on instantaneous gas. You know, one of these, it's mostly connection cost, you know, that's what you're paying for. Hardly any usage. And one day we're going to get rid of that, promise. We're nearly there, that's it. Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm Russell. I've got an electrified Burundara hat on as well. I went through last year deciding what I wanted to do, because as you can see up there, I used to had an old solar system which was getting that lovely attractive 66 feet-in tariff, but it was small, it was unscalable and ready to be replaced. So last year I did a lot of my sums and tried to work out how, if I wanted to go with a battery, and I went through a lot of analysis paralysis and ended up deciding that yes, we wanted to do it. Basically, as you can see there, wanted to reduce the cost impact as we go fully electric. I wanted to get a little bit more off-grid, if you like. Wanted to be largely self-sufficient. So I started going through the calculations. What size did I need of a new solar system? What type of battery? What size battery? What brand? What installer? And the bottom line, I suppose, was a little bit of economics. I went through it and decided on this new Chinese brand called Sig Energy, and it's very new, but it's got a lot of good capability. It's got a bidirectional vehicle to grid capability for your EV charging, and it's stackable. So each of those parts are modules that you can stack to make it bigger as you go. So this is what I've ended up with in my little house just around the corner here. It's a heritage overlay area, so I had to get one of the dreaded Burundara planning permits, which we're going to be working on changing, John, improving. And consequently I've got 3 different arrays facing north, west and south. And up in the corner you've got a picture of my battery, which is an 8 kilowatt inverter and 16 kilowatt hours of battery capacity. I've also got an EV in the driveway, which I charge via a 7 kilowatt charger. As David mentioned, the importance of having blackout protection. And my intentions with all of this, was to try and be self-sufficient largely throughout the year, and during winter to never pay for peak electricity. So David talked about solar saver tariffs. This is the tariff plan that I'm on, which gives me free electricity between 11 and 2, which is when I charge the car, I charge the battery, I run the heat pump. I've trained the family to run the dishwasher and the dryer during that free time. Otherwise, I'm largely running off the battery. This tariff also gives me an attractive feed-in tariff if I'm feeding in when the grid needs it the most. So between, it's got 6 and 8 there, but it's between 5 and 7, I get 15 cents feed-in tariff. So it allows me to charge for free during the day. I've got a big solar system, but this time of the year, the big solar system just doesn't keep up with demand. But through summer and spring, it certainly does. So I thought I'd just give you an indication. I've only had the battery for a little while, but in, I think this was April, I was generating 12 kilowatts on the roof. I was charging the battery charging the EV and the battery from the grid. And because I'm a bit of a geek, this is the actual daily energy usage going from solar, charging the battery, self-consumption and being exported to the grid. The battery, once it's full, is going into the household, but also exporting into the grid. But here you can see, this is where I'm charging my battery for free, which I'm absolutely loving. So that's where I'm at the moment. So got the battery, got the optimal solar saver tariff, and it's working pretty well for me. Am I going to make the money back? No, because I jumped in and missed the $6,000 that would save if I would have done this in 2 weeks' time. But otherwise, I'm pretty damn happy. I've only got to get rid of my gas ducted system, which is scheduled for happening next year.
I've got a bit of a different story. My first move was to install rooftop solar in early 2018. This move reduced my grid consumption and bills, and the payback period was very short. I then got a little bit carried away and I added an Alpha Ess battery without much thought. and initially charged the battery during the day and drew on that battery in the evening, which worked. But I found that in the summer I drew no power from the grid, but in the winter I wasn't getting enough solar generation, and I was drawing on the grid a lot. My next move was to look at solar saver tariffs, which there's been a bit of talk about, but they really worked. I found I could charge my battery for free with OO energy between 11 and 2, and this meant that I only exceeded my stored energy on a few occasions every year. So those really cold days where, even though I'd charged the battery fully, it didn't take me through. I found that the controls on the Alpha Ess did allow me to specify when I could load from the grid, but not when I could feed back. It didn't impact me at the time, but I did find it frustrating. Mistakes that I made, as I did. I joined Amber and was with them during a shoulder period. I think I might have been one of the first Alpha Ess batteries on Amber. There were teething issues with Amber working with the Alpha Ess battery, and the performance was poor. I decided to look elsewhere. Did I give Amber a fair go? I don't know. I will look at them again. But when they had to top me up to give me more, to get my feeding up to the minimum allowed, it did strike me that they weren't managing the battery very well. And 2 years after my battery installation, I paid extra to have backup during outages. It was optional when I installed the battery, and I thought, we don't get many. I then found out that I did want it, and it would have been much cheaper if I'd made the decision earlier. Everything was all right, except that I moved home 2 months ago. My new home had gas ducted heating, solar hot water boosted by gas, and an integrated gas oven and cooktop. So I'd gone completely the other way. I have removed the gas ducted heating and installed reverse cycle air conditioners. Very nice grants. And replaced the gas boosted solar hot water system with a new heat pump hot water. And then, trying to be clever, I replaced the fuse box. But that identified a fault in the oven, and I had to replace that. So I'm now all electric. So, going to solar and battery. My new home has limited roof space. I'm installing solar panels because the old panels were installed a long time ago. And I'm installing a large battery, probably larger than I need. At this stage I'm not sure, but I can't think what I'm going to do with all the power. But the additional cost was very low with the federal rebate meeting most of it. I will be looking at ways to manage the battery either by joining a VPP, by joining a retailer like Amber, or with self-management. But before I join any of these organisations, I'd like to see the benefits that they deliver to customers. I foresee a significant amount of further change coming because I think the tariffs are all going to be all over the place in the coming years. And finally, I'd like to thank the federal and state governments for their financial contributions to my electric commission.
The community benefits I mentioned, they're shared by everyone. So there are sensible ways to spend money through the taxation system. There are sensible ways to spend money through direct subsidies, and I have a very strong opinion that direct subsidies should go to Australians, not to foreign-owned companies. I've mentioned that specifically, and I'll repeat it again. So, but if they're used well, and if they're used to achieve a useful outcome, and I think the battery subsidy is a good idea for that reason, and I think there's other stuff that could be done. I think, but yeah, it's such a big question. To be quite frank, some of the money that's been spent on heat pumps has been a waste, because there's a lot of crap heat pumps out there that probably shouldn't have been installed, and I know some installers won't touch them. So that's probably poor use of taxpayers' money. But other heat pumps that do a reasonable job, last a reasonable amount of time, and meet their efficiency, their claimed efficiency, that's arguably a better spend. So it's a very open-ended question. We could actually run a session on that. I'd actually really like to explore that. I think that would be a useful one, but I don't know how many people would be interested in that. But if we got, say, 20 people along through it, that might be, yeah, there you go, got one of those.
Can I answer that? There is another area where you've got to look at, and that's the gas is running out in Victoria. The cost of replacing that gas and getting gas into the households, and you can forget about the emissions for the moment, is not going to be cheap. And yeah, there is a cost to be borne over the next few years, and I think you'd find that if you ran the figures, you might find that subsidising electrification is a lot cheaper than drilling more gas wells and building more gas infrastructure to put into the pipes.
It'll be hard because I've got a mask on. I just want to thank all the speakers because I learnt something from all of you tonight. But I had a question for Trent. You mentioned if you had a crystal ball and you could give us some indication, we're looking at buying an EV, but would love to be able to use it to power our home as well. What time frame, because like yourself, we've been going, oh, we'll wait a little bit longer and a little bit longer. When would you suggest, is it on the horizon or is it something where we should just get a battery for the house and wait and buy the technology when it's useful?
Yep, great question. So the question was, if I had a crystal ball, when's vehicle to home charging going to be enabled? It's very close, and I believe it because there's pilots happening right now in several states just testing this. So 12 months, I would like to see it happening. It's already happening across the world. We know it works. And the other question was, do I wait for that to happen, or do I bite the bullet now and just get the battery? My question to that would be, let's look at your bills first to see if it's actually worth it. Do you have a big enough solar system to run the home and charge a battery? Would be my first question. With these rebates being only around for 5 years, I'd also consider that because you are getting that 30% discount. So it will just depend on a few of those factors, whether you do that. Because even if you have a home battery and it's doing its thing, you'll still be able to bring your car in and do its thing as well on top of that. I would assume with the technology that I've seen out there. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer, but it'll just come down to your personal situation, how your house is running, and how far down your electrification path you've gone.
A difficult question to answer. Are battery prices going to go up or are they going to go down? If they've got the subsidy, does it mean there's going to be more coming in?
Yeah, so we're going to have a supply chain issue. Like, it's going to be real. Like I said, 7,000 batteries is the average installation across Australia. Not only that is going to be the issue, the actual getting these things signed off by the inspectors. We already have a shortage of inspectors to sign these things off. If you've had solar done recently, it's usually a minimum 2-week wait before your inspector comes out to tick that thing off so you can turn it on. We can technically turn it on the day we leave, but not allowed to, right? So we're going to have no inspectors to actually inspect this work. So there's going to be a big problem, and they gave us 4 weeks to do something about it because we got told about this when it was released to the public. So it'll be interesting to see that space. But to answer your question, batteries should go down much cheaper than what they are now. So by the end of the 5 years, what we're paying $6,000 for now, you might be paying $2,000 for.
Further on using vehicle batteries, I don't know, can't remember the exact figure, but I think I remember something like 40 gigawatt hours already driving around, which dwarfs the household batteries you're talking about installing. What possibilities are there for speeding that up in terms of, I know the two-way inverters at the moment are very expensive. Can something like a Sig inverter that connects straight into the inverter come out a lot cheaper, and can it allow older vehicles to plug into the thing, or is it only new vehicles from now on that will be enabled for that?
Oh, well, it's a very technical question.
He's the one who's bought the Sig Energy.
Here we go.
Just ways to get these vehicles onto the grid and
Yeah. So, as you know, Michael, the Sig Energy battery that you and I both got have got the bidirectional DC charger, and whereas there's a lot of standards to go through to make AC charging bidirectional, DC charging is there almost by default. And internationally, I think there's been about 30 different vehicles that have been approved to work with Sig Energy, but they have not yet been approved in Australia. It's coming. There's a New South Wales distributor that's been approved, and there's one vehicle in Australia that's been approved on yours and my system today. And that's only a rubber stamping job because technically it's already proven in Europe. So it's going to come.
What is that one vehicle?
It's the Ford F-150. You know, the big tank. Who knows why that was the first vehicle, but anyway, it is.
Yeah, well, I have a question. We've got a Tesla, and I think, yeah, oh, yes, I wouldn't have bought one now. Musk is against, I think, having a car act as a house battery because he sells the Powerwalls.
Wants to sell your Powerwall.
Yeah, will it be possible to retrofit cars or not?
My understanding is with DC charging, Tesla is already there. With DC charging, bidirectional charging is already there on a lot of cars. You can't really turn it off because that's just the way DC charging works.
I've got a Nissan Leaf which I bought earlier this year, and that I was told that was
Yes, it's so Nissan and Mitsubishi both use a Japanese charging standard, which is bidirectional, and all of the AC bidirectional charging vehicle to grid, vehicle to home trials have been done on Nissan Leafs. But like I say, once you move to DC bidirectional charging, then it opens it up to many, many more car manufacturers.
I live in an apartment block with an embedded electrical network, an embedded gas, hot water network and a common area load. I'm just interested, Trent, have you done any work on apartment blocks with these sort of parameters?
Yeah. So embedded network, is that for your own home use? Are you on an embedded network for your meter? Or are you talking about the common power? Yeah, just for you. And so you've got...
All the 48 apartments are
on the embedded, yep. So if anyone is on an embedded network, you're not required by any means to actually go with that network. You've got the ability to choose whoever you want. But generally, they set it up so you benefit from it. You get a group discount and whatnot. So you said your hot water's on a common...
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So we've just done a project in Brunswick, one step off the grid. It's been going around socials a fair bit. We ripped out they had common gas hot water that fed 18 units, and they were starting to die again. They were spending $19,000 a year on gas, right? 19 grand a year on gas just to run hot water for 18 apartments. Now they wanted to put solar on the roof, and they were going to go the sole share option, but because they had 18 apartments, with sole share you can only get 15 apartments on one system, so they had to then buy another brains for it. So it'd be sort of become unfeasible. So what we did is we ripped out we did some modelling around it first, got their bills and modelled a plan to go rip out the gas boilers, put hot water heat pumps in. We use reclaim systems because of their recovery rate and warranties, best systems currently on the market. And instead of going a sole share option, we put 11 kilowatts on the roof, and the idea and design around that was to completely offset most of the running costs of this hot water system, heat pump system that we put in. So our modelling predicted that would save them around $16,500 a year if we did that switch. Now this project's been running 10 months, and we're on track to actually make $17,000 savings in the first year. Yep. So it's really important to understand. It's like eating. It's like a diet, right? Like it's calories in, calories out. Like it's the same stuff. It's no more complicated than that. What you use and what you produce, you just got to try and balance that load. Now, what we can do in order to beat this is, now that this battery scheme's coming, we can actually go now, because this hot water runs all night, right? Like it's on a ring mains, there's hot water pump around, so there's still demand there at night. We're now going to go back to this client after 12 months so we understand fully their behavioural pattern, and then offer them a suitably sized battery to pretty much offset all their running costs. So does that help answer that question?
But how much did you have to spend to make that savings?
Yep, so the return on investment is 1.9 years on that project.
Okay, folks, sorry to interrupt you, Trent. I'm just reading Jenny's body language over in the corner here. Have we got time for more questions?
We run to time. So we will be taking questions from the panel afterwards, but we need to wrap up to let the people that have been sitting here politely and don't have their go. So Sarah, can you wrap us up? But the panel is here afterwards and they are happy to take some questions.
Thanks, folks. So, yes, in case you couldn't hear Jenny, there is a chance to ask more questions to the panel immediately after this, but just for anyone who has to leave at 9 on the dot, we're going to wrap up with some final remarks. And the first thing I'd like to do is get David and Trent back up here. That'll get you back up.
Thank you very much.
So we really appreciate you coming out to speak to us tonight. It's been incredibly informative for all of us, I'm sure, and very much appreciated. And we also appreciate you both offering to stick around and take some one-on-one questions directly after this. Much appreciated.